The ship came down through thick gray clouds and landed on frozen ground. Snow flew everywhere. When the engine stopped, there was only silence. The kind of silence that made you feel very small. Yuna stepped out first. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life. She was not tall, not loud, not the kind of person who walked into a room and demanded attention. She was the kind who sat in corners and watched, who listened more than she spoke, who noticed things others missed. Behind her came Taiho, the security officer. He was the opposite of Yuna in many ways. He was big, alert, always scanning for danger. His hand never strayed far from the weapon at his hip. He did not trust this mission. He did not trust this planet. He especially did not trust the creatures they had come to study. Last came Hana, young and bright-eyed, carrying equipment that was almost as big as she was. She was the communication specialist, though there was nothing to communicate with yet. She believed there would be. She believed in things that had not happened yet. The planet was called Verith Prime. It was a world of ice and stone, of endless winters and short gray summers. Nothing about it seemed welcoming. But Yuna had chosen it. She had read every report, every warning, every failed mission log. She knew what lived here. The Korath. They were wolf-like creatures, though calling them wolves felt wrong somehow. Wolves were from Earth. The Korath were something else entirely. They stood taller than any wolf, with silver and gray fur that blended perfectly with the snow. Their eyes were gold, sharp, intelligent. They moved in packs, hunted in silence, and had avoided contact with every alien species that had ever tried to approach them. The galactic records called them primitive, hostile, untamable, dangerous. Yuna did not believe any of it. The outpost was small. Just a few rooms, a laboratory, sleeping quarters, a kitchen. It had been built by a previous team who had left after only 3 months. They had seen nothing, learned nothing, and had grown tired of the cold and the silence. Yuna planned to stay longer. On the first night, she stood at the window and looked out at the forest. The trees were tall and black against the white snow. Nothing moved, but she felt something watching. "You should sleep," Taiho said from behind her. He was checking his equipment for the 3rd time that evening. "Tomorrow will be long." "They're out there," Yuna said quietly. "I can feel them." Taiho came to stand beside her. He looked at the forest with different eyes. Where she saw possibility, he saw threat. "If they come, I'll be ready." "I don't think they'll come," she said. "Not yet. They're watching first. Learning who we are." "How do you know?" Yuna smiled. "Because that's what I would do." The days passed slowly. Yuna set up observation equipment. Hana worked on translating old recordings of Korath sounds, trying to find patterns, meanings, anything. Taiho patrolled the perimeter, looking for tracks, signs of approach. They found both. The Korath were watching them. There were footprints at the edge of the forest every morning. Never closer than 100 meters. Never aggressive. Just present. They could attack at any time, Taiho said during one of their evening meals. "We're sitting here like prey." "Prey runs," Yuna said. "We're not running. Maybe we should." Hana looked up from her screen. The Galactic Council spent 200 years trying to make contact with the Korath. Every attempt failed. They sent soldiers, diplomats, scientists. Nothing worked. Maybe what the Korath need isn't someone who tries to reach them. Maybe they need someone who waits. Taiho shook his head. "That's a nice thought. But nice thoughts don't stop predators." Yuna said nothing. She was thinking about the footprints. How they never came closer. How they never went away. On the 12th day, something changed. Yuna was outside collecting ice samples when she heard a sound. It was high-pitched, almost like a cry. She turned toward the forest and saw movement. Cubs. 3 of them. Small, fluffy, with oversized paws and ears too big for their heads. They were playing near the edge of the trees, tumbling over each other, nipping at tails and ears. Yuna froze. She barely breathed. The cubs had wandered onto an ice shelf. She could see the cracks in it from where she stood. The ice was old and unstable. If they went further, it might break. Every instinct told her to move, to call out, to warn them somehow. But she stayed still. This was not her place. These were not her children. The Korath had survived on this world for thousands of years without human help. They did not need her. She watched. One of the cubs noticed the cracks. It made a small sound of alarm. The others stopped playing. They looked around, suddenly aware of the danger. Then came Silverback. That was what Yuna called her in her mind. The alpha of the pack. A massive female with gray fur so pale it looked silver in the light. She moved through the trees like a ghost, silent and fast, and gathered her cubs with practiced ease. She guided them away from the dangerous ice, away from the edge of the forest. Then she stopped. She turned and looked directly at Yuna. The distance between them was maybe 50 meters. Close enough to see those golden eyes. Close enough to feel the weight of that gaze. Yuna did not look away. She did not move. She simply stood there, open and still, letting the alpha see her. Silverback stared for a long moment. It felt like hours. Then she turned and disappeared into the forest with her cubs. That night, Yuna wrote in her journal, "She saw me. She knew I could have interfered, but I didn't. I think she's trying to understand why." Taiho read the entry over her shoulder and frowned. "You should have called me. If that alpha had decided you were a threat to her cubs, you'd be dead." "But she didn't," Yuna said. "She looked at me. Really looked. That's more than any previous team got in months of trying. Looking isn't trusting." "No," Yuna agreed. "But it's a start." Hana was excited by the news. She spent the next 3 days reviewing footage, analyzing Silverback's body language, comparing it to records of other pack animals across the galaxy. "She wasn't just protecting her cubs," Hana said finally. "She was evaluating you, testing you. She wanted to see what you would do. And what did I do? Nothing. You respected her space. You let her handle it." Hana smiled. "In pack dynamics, that's not weakness. That's recognition. You showed her that you understand she's the leader here. Not you." Taiho was not convinced. He increased his patrols, checked his weapons more often, slept lighter at night. But even he had to admit that the Korath had not attacked, had not even threatened. They were still watching from the trees. Every day, Yuna saw movement in the shadows, golden eyes catching the light. But now, instead of fear, she felt something else. Hope. The pack watched in silence. And Yuna watched back. She did not know what would come next. She did not know if the Korath would ever trust her, or if Silverback's curiosity would fade. She only knew that she would not leave. She would not push. She would wait. Because some things could not be rushed. Some things had to be earned. And Yuna had always been good at waiting. 3 weeks passed on Vurath Prime. The cold grew deeper. The nights grew longer. And the pack grew thinner. Yuna noticed it first. She spent hours each day watching the forest through her observation equipment. She recorded everything. The hunts, the movements, the way the pack gathered at dusk and disappeared at dawn. She knew their patterns now. She knew when they were healthy and when they were not. They were not healthy. The prey animals that the Korath usually hunted had started dying. A blight, some kind of sickness, was spreading through the herds. The creatures were falling ill, their meat becoming poison. The pack had no choice but to let them die untouched. Without food, the Korath were starving. Yuna could see it in the way they moved. Slower now. Less energy. The adults were thin, their ribs showing beneath their fur. The cubs had stopped playing. They stayed close to their mothers, too tired to explore. Silverback still stood tall, still led with strength and purpose. But even she was thinner. Even she was struggling. "We can't do anything," Taiho said when Yuna shared her observations. "This is nature. This is how it works. Species die when food runs out. It's not our place to interfere." "I know the protocol," Yuna said quietly. "No interference with natural ecosystems. No altering the development of native species. I've read the rules 100 times. Then, you know what we have to do. Nothing." Yuna looked out the window at the gray sky. The protocol was written by people who never watched children starve. Hannah was sitting in the corner, her face pale. She had been listening. "What are you thinking, Yuna?" "I'm thinking about the emergency rations we have stored. The ones we're supposed to use if our supply ship is delayed." Yuna turned to face them both. "I'm thinking about leaving some at the edge of the forest." Taiho stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Absolutely not. That's a violation of every rule we have. You could lose your position. We could all be sent home." "Sent home to what?" Yuna asked. "To tell people we watched an intelligent species starve because we were too afraid to break a rule? What does that make us?" "It makes us scientists who follow protocol." Yuna shook her head. "It makes us cowards." The argument lasted for hours. Taiho shouted. Yuna stayed calm. Hannah tried to find middle ground that did not exist. In the end, nothing was decided. They went to bed angry and woke up the same way. But the next morning, Yuna was already gone when Taiho came to the kitchen. She had taken a container of emergency rations. Dried protein, nutrient paste, things that could survive the cold. She walked to the edge of the forest alone, her breath forming clouds in the freezing air. She placed the container on the ground. Then she turned and walked back to the outpost without looking behind her. Taiho was waiting for her at the door. His face was red with anger, but he did not yell. He just looked at her with something close to disappointment. "You've doomed this mission," he said. "Maybe," Yuna replied. "Or maybe I've saved it." She walked past him and went to the observation room. She sat down at her station and watched the forest. The food sat untouched for 2 days. Yuna did not move it. She did not add more. She simply waited, checking the footage every few hours. The pack knew the food was there. She could see them watching it from the shadows. But they did not approach. "They don't trust it," Hana said on the second evening. "They think it's a trap. Can you blame them?" Taiho muttered. He had stopped yelling at Yuna, but he had not forgiven her either. Every alien species that ever came here tried to use them, hunt them, study them like animals in a cage. Why would they trust us? "Because we're different," Hana said. "Are we?" No one answered. On the third night, Yuna was about to give up. The food would freeze soon, become useless. She had tried, and she had failed. Then her screen lit up with movement. Silverback, the alpha, was walking toward the food. Alone. No cubs, no other adults. Just her, moving through the snow like a silver shadow. Yuna held her breath. Silverback reached the container. She circled it once, twice, 3 times. She sniffed the air. She looked toward the outpost, and Yuna felt those golden eyes find her through the window. Then Silverback ate. It was not much. Just a few bites. A test, perhaps. A taste to see if the food was safe. Then she picked up the container in her jaws and carried it back to the forest. Yuna did not sleep that night. She sat at her station and watched, her heart beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. In the morning, something was waiting at the outpost door. A carcass. A creature Yuna did not recognize. It was about the size of a large dog, with thick fur and small horns. It had been killed cleanly, quickly. A hunter's kill. Yuna called the others. Hana analyzed the meat and found that humans could not digest it. The proteins were wrong, the cellular structure too different. They could not eat it. But that was not the point. She's giving back, Hana whispered. She's returning the gift. Taiho stared at the carcass with wide eyes. That's unprecedented. The Korath have never given anything to outsiders. Ever. It's not in any of the records. Because no one ever gave to them first, Yuna said quietly. Everyone who came here wanted something. We were the first to offer. She picked up the carcass carefully, respectfully, and carried it to the edge of the forest. She left it there in the snow. A message. I see what you did. I understand. That evening, Silverback appeared at the tree line. She did not come closer. She simply stood there, watching. Her golden eyes were fixed on Yuna, who stood at the window watching back. The cubs were with her this time. 3 small shapes, pressing close to their mother's legs. They were still thin, still weak from hunger. But they were alive. And they were watching too. From that day forward, Silverback came every evening. Always at the same time, always to the same spot. She would stand at the edge of the forest and watch the outpost until the sun went down. Yuna began leaving food regularly. Small amounts, never too much. Enough to help, not enough to make them dependent. Taiho stopped arguing. He even started helping carry the containers. I still think this breaks every rule, he said one evening. But I've been watching them. The cubs are getting stronger. The pack is recovering. Some rules are worth breaking, Yuna said. Hana was documenting everything. Every exchange, every gift, every moment of contact. She believed they were witnessing history. No one has ever gotten this far with the Korath, she said. Centuries of failed contact, and we've done more in a few weeks than anyone else managed in lifetimes. All because you sat down some food and walked away. Yuna shook her head. I didn't do anything special. I just treated them like equals. I gave without expecting to take. I trusted them to decide what to do. That's exactly what's special, Hana said. That's what no one else ever tried. The winter continued, cold and long and dark. But something had changed on Varith Prime. The pack no longer hid in the shadows. They came closer now, watching openly. The cubs were curious, pressing forward, wanting to see these strange tall creatures who brought food and asked for nothing. Silverback watched her cubs with what Yuna could only describe as thoughtfulness. She was making a decision, weighing risks against possibilities, considering something she had never considered before: trust. One evening, as the sun was setting and the sky turned orange and gold, Silverback did something new. She sat down, right at the edge of the forest. She lowered her massive body into the snow and simply sat, her eyes on the outpost, her posture relaxed. Yuna understood immediately. It was an invitation. The pack had been watching in silence for weeks. Now they were ready for something more. They were ready to see what the humans would do next. Yuna smiled. She had been patient. She had given without taking. And now, for the first time, the Korath were giving her a chance. She would not waste it. The storm came without warning. Yuna woke to the sound of wind screaming against the walls of the outpost. The windows were covered in ice so thick she could not see through them. Snow fell so fast and heavy that it seemed like the whole world had turned white. Generators holding. Taiho called from the equipment room. But we're not going anywhere for a while. They were trapped inside for 4 days. The wind never stopped. The snow piled higher and higher against the doors. Una tried to watch the forest through the cameras, but they were frozen, useless. She could see nothing. She thought about Silverback, about the cubs, about the pack huddled somewhere in the forest, waiting out the same storm. Were they safe? Were they warm? Did they have enough food to survive? She could not know. She could only wait. On the 5th day, the storm finally stopped. Una was the first to open the door. She had to push hard against the snow that had piled against it. When she finally got outside, she gasped. The world had changed. Everything was buried. The trees at the edge of the forest looked like white ghosts, their branches heavy with snow. The ground was smooth and untouched. The silence was complete. Even the wind had stopped. And standing at the clearing between the outpost and the forest was the entire pack. Una froze. She had never seen them all together before. Not like this. There were at least 30 of them. Adults, elders, cubs. Silver fur and gray fur and white fur. Golden eyes, all watching. All silent. Silverback stood at the front, her massive body still and calm. They were waiting. Una. Taiho's voice came from behind her. She heard the click of his weapon being readied. Get back inside, now. No, they're right there. All of them. If this is an attack, it's not an attack. Una did not turn around. She kept her eyes on the pack, on Silverback, on those golden eyes that seemed to see right through her. Look at them. Really look. Taiho was quiet for a moment. Then he said, very softly, they're not moving. No, they're waiting. For what? Una took a breath. The cold air filled her lungs, sharp and clean. For me. She stepped forward. Una, don't. She kept walking. Taiho followed, weapon raised, but Una held up a hand without looking back. Stay there, please. Trust me. She did not know if he listened. She did not look. Her entire focus was on the pack, on the space between her and them, on each step she took through the deep snow. The walk to the center of the clearing felt like the longest walk of her life. Every step brought her closer to 30 predators who could kill her in seconds. Every step took her further from safety, from shelter, from everything familiar. But she kept walking. When she reached the center of the clearing, she stopped. The pack was maybe 20 meters away now. She could see individual faces. The old ones with scars across their muzzles. The young ones with bright, curious eyes. The mothers with cubs pressed against their sides. And Silverback, watching. Always watching. Una took one more breath. Then she sat down. She lowered herself into the snow, crossed her legs beneath her, and placed her hands on her knees. Her body language was open. No weapons. No threat. No movement. She simply sat. The pack did not move. Minutes passed. The cold seeped through Una's clothes, numbing her legs, her hands, her face. But she did not move. She barely breathed. She kept her eyes soft, unfocused, looking at the pack without staring. She was showing them something. She was telling them, with her body, with her stillness, with her willingness to sit in the freezing cold without protection or defense, I trust you. I am not afraid. I have time. The silence stretched on. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Una's fingers were turning blue. Her legs had lost all feeling. She could see her breath forming crystals in the air. Still, she did not move. Then one of the cubs broke away from the pack. It was small, barely bigger than a dog, with fluffy gray fur and ears too big for its head. It walked toward Una with the clumsy confidence of youth, its golden eyes wide and curious. Silverback made a small sound, low in her throat. A warning, perhaps. or permission. The cub kept coming. When it reached Yuna, it stopped. It sniffed the air around her, its nose twitching. It circled her once, twice. Then, to Yuna's amazement, it sat down, right beside her. The cub mimicked her posture, sitting back on its haunches, facing the pack. It looked at its family as if to say, "See? It's safe." A second cub followed. This one was bolder, practically bouncing through the snow. It sat on Yuna's other side, pressing its small, warm body against her frozen leg. Then a third cub came, and a fourth. Within minutes, Yuna was surrounded. The cubs sat with her in the snow, their small bodies forming a circle around her. Some pressed close for warmth. Others sat at a slight distance, still cautious. But all of them stayed. Yuna felt tears freezing on her cheeks. She looked at Silverback. The alpha had not moved, but something in her posture had changed. Her body was relaxed now. Her eyes were soft. She was watching her cubs sit with a stranger, and she was not afraid. She was not attacking. She was not calling them back. She was allowing it. Behind Yuna, at the outpost door, Hana was crying. Taiho had lowered his weapon. They were watching something that had never happened before in the history of galactic contact. A human was sitting in the snow, surrounded by the cubs of a species that had never trusted anyone. And the pack was letting it happen. The sun began to set. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple. The cold grew more intense, but Yuna barely felt it anymore. The cubs had warmed her. Their small bodies gave off heat like little furnaces. Silverback finally moved. She walked toward Yuna with slow, deliberate steps. Each movement was careful, measured. She was giving Yuna time to react, time to run, time to show fear. Yuna did not move. Silverback stopped less than a meter away. This close, Yuna could see every detail of her face. The silver fur around her muzzle, the scars on her ears from old fights, the depth of intelligence in those golden eyes. The alpha lowered her head. She breathed on Yuna's face. Warm breath against frozen skin. A moment of contact, of recognition, of something that might have been respect. Then Silverback turned and walked back to the pack. The adults parted to let her through. She stood at the front again, looking back at Yuna and the cubs. Then, one by one, the adult Kareth began to sit. First the elders, then the mothers, then the hunters and the young adults. They lowered their bodies into the snow, forming a wide circle around the clearing. 30 Kareth. All sitting, all silent, all watching. And at the center, a single human woman surrounded by cubs. Night fell. Stars appeared in the clear sky. The temperature dropped even further. No one moved. Yuna did not know how long she sat there. Hours, perhaps. The cubs fell asleep around her, their breathing slow and steady. The adults remained awake, watching, waiting. Finally, when Yuna's body could take no more cold, she moved. She stood slowly, carefully, making sure not to disturb the sleeping cubs. Her legs screamed with pain as blood returned to them. Silverback stood too. The pack rose as one, a wave of silver and gray in the starlight. Yuna walked back to the outpost on legs that barely worked. Taiho met her at the door and wrapped his jacket around her. Hana was still crying. What just happened? Taiho whispered. Yuna looked back at the forest. The pack was gone, melted back into the shadows. But she knew they were still watching. They let me in, she said. They finally let me in. That night, Yuna dreamed of golden eyes and silver fur. Of cubs pressing close and elders watching with ancient wisdom. Of a pack that had waited centuries for someone who would simply sit down and wait with them. She had shown them patience. And they had answered with trust. It was only the beginning. The months that followed changed everything. After the night in the clearing, the barrier between humans and Korath began to fade. It did not happen all at once. Trust was not built in a day, but it was built slowly and steadily through 1,000 small moments. The cubs came first. They began visiting the outpost almost every day, tumbling through the snow, chasing each other, investigating everything they could find. They were curious about the strange structures the humans had built, the equipment, the lights that glowed at night. Hannah was their favorite. She sat on the ground with them, teaching them simple games. She would hide small objects under cups and let them find them. She would toss snowballs for them to chase. She would make sounds with her hands, clapping rhythms that made their ears perk up with interest. In return, the cubs taught her things too. They showed her their hunting signals, the way they moved their ears when they spotted prey, the sounds they made to warn each other of danger, the gestures that meant follow me and stay back, and this is mine. Hannah documented all of it, filling notebooks with drawings and recordings. She was witnessing a language that no outsider had ever learned. And the cubs were teaching her willingly, patiently, as if they understood how important it was. Taiho's transformation was slower, but perhaps more surprising. He had been the most resistant, the most afraid. But watching the cubs play, watching Yuna sit peacefully among them, watching the pack's hostility fade into something softer, he began to change. One day, while patrolling the perimeter, he found a cub trapped under a fallen branch. It was whimpering, its leg twisted at a painful angle. Taiho could have walked away. Protocol said he should not interfere. Instead, he knelt down and carefully lifted the branch. The cub looked at him with wide golden eyes trembling. Taiho spoke softly, gently, the way he would speak to a frightened child. He freed the leg and stepped back. The cub limped away into the forest. That night, Silverback came to the outpost door. She stood there in the moonlight, her golden eyes fixed on Taiho. He stepped outside, his heart pounding. He had no weapon. He did not need one. Silverback lowered her head. She breathed on his face, the same gesture of recognition she had given Yuna. Then she turned and walked away. From that day on, Taiho was part of the pack's acceptance too. Yuna's bond with the Korath grew deepest of all. One morning, Silverback appeared at the edge of the forest and did something unprecedented. She waited, watching Yuna, then turned and walked into the trees. She looked back once. An invitation. Yuna followed. The pack's den was hidden deep in the forest, in a cave system carved into an ancient hillside. No outsider had ever seen it. No record of it existed in any galactic database. Yuna was the first. She walked through tunnels of ice and stone, following Silverback's silver form in the darkness. The air grew warmer as they went deeper. She heard sounds ahead, soft breathing, small movements, the quiet songs of a family at rest. The main chamber opened before her like a cathedral. It was huge, carved by nature and generations of Korath. The walls were marked with scratches, old stories told in claw marks. Furs lined the floor. Cubs played in corners. Elders slept in warm alcoves. And every eye turned to Yuna when she entered. She stood still. She did not speak. She waited for them to decide what she was. Silverback walked to the center of the chamber and sat down. She looked at Yuna, then at the pack, then at Yuna again. A sound rippled through the pack. A low hum, almost like a song. It was not threatening. It was acknowledgement. Welcome. Yuna was crying again. She did not try to stop. Over the following weeks, she returned to the den many times. She learned their ways. She watched their ceremonies. She saw how they mourned their dead, burying them beneath cairns of stone. She saw how they celebrated births, the whole pack gathering to greet each new cub. She learned their language of posture and sound, the way they communicated complex ideas without words. She understood now why they had rejected every previous attempt at contact. Those attempts had been about dominance, about study, about taking. Una was here to give. Word spread beyond Vareth Prime. Galactic observers arrived. Scientists and diplomats from a dozen species, all wanting to witness the impossible. The Korath, the untamable, the hostile primitives, were living peacefully alongside humans. They watched from the outpost, not allowed closer. They recorded everything they could. They wrote reports and held meetings and debated what it all meant. One of them, a tall official with gray skin and too many eyes, asked Una how she had done it. How did you succeed where everyone else failed? Una thought for a long moment before answering. I didn't try to dominate them, she said finally. I didn't try to tame them. I didn't want anything from them. I just sat down and showed them I had time. The official did not understand. Una did not expect him to. As winter turned to spring and the ice began to thaw, Silverback grew old. It was visible now. The gray in her muzzle, the stiffness in her movements, the way she tired more easily. She had led the pack for many years, but time was catching up. One evening, Una found her lying alone at the edge of the forest. She was injured. A hunting wound, perhaps. Blood matted her silver fur. Una approached slowly, carefully. She knelt beside the great alpha and looked into those golden eyes. Silverback did not growl. She did not pull away. She simply watched. Una cleaned the wound. She applied medicine from the outpost, things that would help the healing, prevent infection. Her hands moved gently over the silver fur, touching something wild and ancient and powerful. When she was done, Silverback made a sound. A low rumble that vibrated through her whole body. It was not a growl. It was gratitude. From that day, Una was no longer a visitor. She was family. The pack treated her as one of their own. They hunted for her. They protected her. When she walked through the forest, cubs ran beside her and adults cleared the path. And when danger came, they fought for her. A rival predator, a creature of scales and too many teeth, wandered into the territory. It was desperate, hungry, and it saw Una as easy prey. It charged. Before it could reach her, Taiho was there. He stood between Una and the beast, no weapon in his hands, only his body. And beside him stood Silverback. The alpha, old and wounded, rose to her full height. She let out a roar that shook the trees. Behind her, the entire pack emerged from the forest, 30 voices joining hers. The predator fled. That night, the pack gathered at the clearing. Humans and Korath sitting together under the stars. Taiho, who had once been so afraid, now sat among the hunters as an equal. Hannah played with the cubs. Una rested her hand on Silverback's silver head. No one spoke. No one needed to. They had become something new. Not human. Not Korath. Something in between. A family forged from patience and trust, and the simple act of sitting down when everyone else had stood and demanded. Una looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, other species were still fighting, still conquering, still failing to understand that the greatest power was not the ability to take, but the willingness to wait. She hoped, someday, they would learn what she had learned here, that the pack does not follow those who demand. The pack follows those who earn. Years passed on Vareth Prime. The outpost grew into something larger. More buildings appeared. More humans came and went. More connections were made between species. What had once been a lonely research station at the edge of the universe became something else entirely. A symbol. A proof. A home. Una aged. Her hair turned gray, then white. Her movement slowed. The cold bothered her more than it used to. But she never left Vareth Prime. She could not. This was where she belonged. Hannah stayed too. She had grown from a young communication specialist into a renowned xenolinguist. She had written books about the Koroth language, taught at universities across the galaxy, trained a new generation of researchers who came to study what Yuna had started. But she always came back. Taiho was gone. He had died 5 years ago, peacefully in his sleep. The pack had mourned him in their way, gathering at his burial site and singing their low songs of farewell. He was buried at the edge of the forest, where he could watch over both worlds forever. Silverback was gone too. She had lived longer than most alphas, but time claims everyone eventually. Her last night had been spent at Yuna's side, the great silver head resting in her lap. When dawn came, Silverback did not rise. The pack carried her to a place deep in the mountains, a sacred place where only the greatest leaders were laid to rest. Yuna was the only outsider ever permitted to attend. But Silverback's legacy lived on. Her children led the pack now. Her grandchildren ran through the snow, strong and curious and unafraid of humans. The gray markings of her bloodline showed in dozens of faces, a living reminder of the alpha who had been brave enough to trust. And the pack remembered. Stories were passed down from elders to cubs. Stories of the time before, when outsiders were enemies. Stories of the human who came and did not demand. Stories of the sitting, the offering, the first touch of trust. Yuna had become legend. She did not think of herself that way. She was just a woman who had been willing to wait. But to the Koroth, she was something more. The first bridge. The proof that different could also mean family. On the last day of winter, Yuna asked Hana to help her walk to the old clearing. Her body was failing. She knew it. She had known it for months. This would be her last journey. Hana held her arm, helping her through the snow. The path was familiar. Yuna had walked it 1,000 times. But it had never felt so long. When they reached the clearing, the pack was already there. Not just a pack from the forest. Others had come. Koroth from distant territories, packs that had heard the stories. They had traveled for days to be here, to see the human one last time. There were hundreds of them. Yuna stopped at the edge of the clearing, her breath catching in her throat. Hana was crying beside her. "They came for you," Hana whispered. They all came. Yuna walked forward alone. Her steps were slow, painful, but she made it to the center of the clearing, to the same spot where she had first sat down all those years ago. The same spot where the cubs had followed. She looked at the sea of golden eyes watching her. She saw Silverback's grandchildren at the front, the same gray markings on their silver fur. She saw elders she had known for decades and cubs she had never met. She saw a living testament to everything that had grown from a single act of patience. She sat down. Her old bones creaked in protest. The cold seeped through her clothes. But she did not notice. She was looking at the pack, at all of them, and she was smiling. One by one, the Koroth began to sit. The cubs came first, just as they had all those years ago. They padded toward her through the snow and settled around her, their small bodies warm against her legs. Then the young adults. Then the hunters and the mothers. Then the elders, lowering their ancient bodies with care. Within minutes, the entire clearing was filled. Hundreds of Koroth, sitting in the snow, silent, watching, honoring. A young cub, barely old enough to leave its mother's side, pushed through the crowd. It was small and clumsy, with fluffy gray fur and ears too big for its head. It looked exactly like the first cub that ever approached Yuna. Silverback's great-grandchild, perhaps. The newest link in an unbroken chain. The cub walked up to Yuna and stopped. It studied her with ancient golden eyes, as if seeing something beyond the old woman in front of it, as if recognizing something deeper. Then it pressed its forehead to hers. Yuna knew this gesture. It was the pack's sign of deepest kinship, the ultimate expression of love and belonging. It was usually reserved for family, for blood, for those who would be remembered forever. She closed her eyes. Tears fell, freezing on her cheeks. But she was smiling. She had never stopped smiling. When she opened her eyes again, the cub was still there, still touching her, still telling her, in the only language it knew, "You are ours. You always were. You always will be." Hana watched from the edge of the clearing, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. She would write about this moment later. She would tell the story to everyone who would listen. But she knew that no words could ever capture what she was seeing. A woman at the end of her life, surrounded by a species that had become her family. A pack that had waited centuries for someone to sit with them. A legacy that would never be forgotten. The sun began to set. The sky turned orange and gold and purple. The light fell on the clearing like a blessing, making the snow sparkle like stars. Yuna looked up at the sky. She thought about Taiho, about Silverback, about all the years that had brought her here. She thought about the young woman who had stepped off a ship and seen only possibility where others saw danger. She thought about sitting down. Just sitting down. Such a simple thing. Such a powerful thing. The pack remained with her as night fell. They did not leave. They would not leave. Not until it was over. Yuna's eyes grew heavy. Her breathing slowed. The cub's warmth was steady against her forehead. She was not afraid. She was home. When the first stars appeared, Yuna closed her eyes for the last time. She went quietly, peacefully, surrounded by golden eyes and silver fur and the deepest love she had ever known. The pack sat with her through the night. They sang their songs of farewell, low and mournful and beautiful. They honored her the way they honored their greatest leaders, their most beloved family. In the morning, they carried her to the mountains, to the sacred place where Silverback rested. They laid her beside the Alpha who had first trusted her. Two legends, together forever. And when the sun rose on Vareth Prime, the pack returned to their forest. But they were different now. All of them. Every pack, every territory, every generation. Because the story was passed down. The legend was remembered. And the word for human changed. Once, it had meant strange walker. A sound of caution, of suspicion, of fear. Now it meant something else. The ones who sit with us. Years later, when other humans came to Vareth Prime, they were greeted with that word. They were welcomed. They were trusted. Because of what one woman had done, a bridge had been built that would never break. And somewhere in the mountains, under a cairn of ancient stone, Yuna rested beside her pack. The wind blew across the snow. The stars wheeled overhead. The forest breathed its quiet life. And the pack remembered. They would always remember.